Her only daughter needed a donor. The only match was the man who destroyed her heart. The fluorescent lights of Crescent Harbor Medical Center hummed above Reverie Whitlock's head as Dr. Castellan closed the folder in his hands and looked at her with an expression she had learned to fear over the past 6 weeks. It was the expression that preceded bad news. The expression that meant her world was about to shift again. But nothing could have prepared her for the words that came next. "Mrs. Whitlock, we found a match." Reverie's heart stopped. For 6 weeks, she had been living in a nightmare. Her 8-year-old daughter Cypress was dying from aplastic anemia, a rare bone marrow failure that was slowly stealing her life. The National Registry had come up empty. Every test had failed. Every prayer had gone unanswered. Until now. "You found someone?" Reverie whispered, her voice cracking. "There is a donor?" Dr. Castellan nodded slowly, but something in his eyes made her pause. "Yes. A perfect match, actually. The genetic markers align completely. It is remarkable how compatible they are. Then why do you look like you are about to deliver more bad news?" The doctor hesitated. He glanced down at the folder, then back at Reverie. "The match came through an extended family genetic database. The donor is not a stranger, Mrs. Whitlock." The room grew colder. Reverie felt the blood drain from her face as understanding began to dawn. "Who is it?" Dr. Castellan took a breath. "The donor is Stellan Vance. According to our records, he is listed as Cypress's biological father." The name hit her like a physical blow. Stellan Vance, the man she had loved with every fiber of her being. The man who had promised her forever on a rainy beach 9 years ago. The man who had abandoned her while she hemorrhaged alone in a hospital bed, their premature daughter fighting for life in the NICU. The man who had destroyed her heart. Reverie gripped the armrest of her chair as the room began to spin. No. No. There has to be another way. Someone else. Anyone else. "I am sorry." Dr. Castellan's voice was gentle but firm. "We have exhausted every option. The registry, extended family matches, everything. Stellan Vance is the only compatible donor we have found. And Mrs. Whitlock, I need you to understand something. Without this transplant, Cypress has weeks, maybe a month if we are fortunate." Reverie closed her eyes, and for a moment she was back in that hospital room 8 years ago. Alone, terrified, bleeding out while nurses shouted orders and machines screamed warnings. She remembered reaching for her phone again and again, calling Stellan, begging him to answer. He never did. And when he finally appeared 2 days later, looking exhausted and guilty, he had offered her nothing but hollow apologies and a confession that shattered whatever was left of her heart. "I was with someone else," he had said. "Margot, my ex-girlfriend. She was in crisis. I had to be there for her." Reverie had not waited for explanations. She had not wanted them. She signed the divorce papers, took her fragile newborn daughter, and disappeared to this small fishing village on the coast of Maine. For 8 years, she had built a life without him. For 8 years, she had answered Cypress's questions about her father with careful deflections and half-truths. And now the universe was playing its cruelest joke yet. "Mrs. Whitlock?" Dr. Castellan's voice pulled her back to the present. "Do you want me to contact him?" Reverie opened her eyes. Through the window of the doctor's office, she could see the pediatric ward down the hall. Somewhere in there, her daughter was sleeping, growing weaker by the day, asking questions about why her body was betraying her. How do you ask the man who destroyed your heart to give your daughter a second chance at life? She did not know the answer, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would walk through fire for Cypress. She would swallow her pride, her pain, her hatred. She would face the ghost of her past and beg if she had to, because her daughter's life was worth more than her broken heart. "Yes," Reverie whispered, the word tasting like ash on her tongue. "Contact him." Before we continue this emotional journey, if you are new here, take a moment to subscribe to Cedar Drama and tap that notification bell. This story is going to take you through twists you will not see coming, and you will not want to miss a single moment. Drop a comment right now telling me you are here, and let us go back to where this all began. Crescent Harbor was the kind of place that time seemed to forget. Nestled along the rugged coast of Maine, the small fishing village existed in a world of salt air and morning fog, of weathered docks and boats that had been passed down through generations. The year-round population barely reached 800 souls, and everyone knew everyone else's business, heartbreaks, and hopes. Reverie Whitlock had stumbled upon this town 8 years ago, running from a life that had crumbled to dust. She had arrived with a 3-week-old baby in a car seat, 2 suitcases of clothes, and a heart so shattered she was not sure it would ever beat normally again. She had not planned to stay. Crescent Harbor was supposed to be a rest stop, a place to catch her breath before figuring out her next move. But something about the village had wrapped itself around her wounded soul and refused to let go. Maybe it was the way the ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, reminding her that the world was bigger than her pain. Maybe it was the kindness of strangers who asked no questions but offered everything. Maybe it was simply the exhaustion of a new mother with no one to lean on, finding a place that felt safe enough to stop running. Whatever the reason, Reverie had stayed. She had taken a job as a pediatric nurse at the small medical center, rented a cottage with peeling blue paint just steps from the shore, and slowly, painfully, rebuilt her life from the ground up. Now, 8 years later, that cottage was home. The blue paint had been refreshed, the garden bloomed with wildflowers every spring, and the walls held the laughter and tears of a mother and daughter who had learned to be enough for each other. "Mama, wake up! It is shell hunting time." Reverie opened her eyes to find Cypress standing beside her bed, already dressed in her favorite yellow raincoat, a bucket clutched in her small hands. The morning light filtering through the curtains caught the gold in her daughter's hair, and for a moment, Reverie's heart ached with a familiar bittersweet pain. Cypress had her father's eyes, that distinctive shade of gray-green that seemed to shift like the sea. Every time Reverie looked at her daughter, she saw Stellan staring back at her. It was both a blessing and a curse. "What time is it, little starfish?" Reverie mumbled, reaching for her phone. 6:32. Cypress announced this with the confidence of a child who had no concept of sleeping in. "The tide is going out. We have to hurry or all the good shells will be gone." "All the good shells will be gone," Reverie repeated with a sleepy smile. "Well, we certainly cannot let that happen." Their morning ritual had begun when Cypress was barely old enough to walk. Every day, weather permitting, they would trek down to the rocky shore before breakfast and search for treasures left behind by the retreating tide. Cypress had amassed a collection that took up an entire bookshelf in her room. Sea glass organized by color, shells sorted by size, smooth stones that she painted with tiny sea creatures. These mornings were sacred. No phones, no distractions, just the two of them and the endless conversation of the waves. "Mama," Cypress said as they picked their way across the tide pools, "do you think my father ever collected shells?" The question caught Reverie off guard, as it always did when Cypress asked about the man she had never known. She had gotten better at navigating these moments over the years, but they still felt like walking through a minefield. "I am not sure, sweetheart." Reverie kept her voice light. "Why do you ask?" Cypress shrugged, her small fingers closing around a piece of blue sea glass. "Odalis said I have my father's eyes. She said eyes like that usually come from someone who loves the ocean." Odalis Mercado was Reverie's closest friend, the wife of a local fisherman, and apparently someone who needed to learn to keep certain observations to herself. "Well," Reverie said carefully, "your father did love the ocean. That much is true. Do you think he ever thinks about me?" The innocent question pierced Reverie's heart like a blade. She stopped walking and knelt down to meet her daughter's gaze. Those gray-green eyes, so full of curiosity and longing, searched her face for answers she did not know how to give. "I think," Reverie said slowly, "that any father would be lucky to have a daughter like you, and I think that wherever he is, some part of him knows what he is missing." It was not a lie, exactly, just a truth wrapped in enough ambiguity to protect them both. Cypress seemed to accept this. She nodded solemnly, tucked the sea glass into her bucket, and continued her hunt. But Reverie remained kneeling for a moment longer, watching her daughter explore the shore with the same boundless wonder she brought to everything. "Please," Reverie thought, "not quite a prayer, but close enough. Please let her have more mornings like this. Please do not let me lose her too." She did not know then that her plea would be answered in the cruelest possible way. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 weeks before Dr. Castellan delivered his devastating news. Cypress had always been an energetic child, the kind who woke up ready to conquer the world and fell asleep mid-sentence, exhausted from the day's adventures. But lately, She had been different, tired in a way that sleep did not fix, quiet in moments when she should have been laughing. She is probably just fighting off a bug, O'Dallas had said when Reverie mentioned her concerns. Kids get run down. It happens. But Reverie was a nurse. She knew the difference between a child who was tired and a child whose body was failing. And when she noticed the bruises, small purple marks appearing on Cypress's arms and legs with no explanation, the fear that had been simmering in her gut exploded into full-blown terror. The day Cypress collapsed at school, Reverie was in the middle of a shift at the medical center. She remembered the exact moment her phone rang, the caller ID showing Crescent Harbor Elementary. She remembered the principal's voice, trying to stay calm while explaining that Cypress had fainted during recess and would not wake up. She remembered running through the hospital corridors, her nursing shoes squeaking against the linoleum, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. By the time she reached the school, the ambulance was already there. Cypress was conscious but confused, her small face pale against the stretcher, her gray-green eyes finding her mother with a look of fear Reverie had never seen before. "Mama, what is happening to me?" Reverie climbed into the ambulance and held her daughter's hand, whispering reassurances she was not sure she believed. "You are going to be okay, little starfish. I promise. Mama is right here." The test began that afternoon. Blood draws, bone marrow biopsies, scans that required Cypress to lie still in machines that hummed and clicked around her. Reverie stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, reading her stories, pretending that everything was fine. But it was not fine, and when Dr. Castellan finally called her into his office to deliver the diagnosis, Reverie felt the floor drop out from under her feet. Aplastic anemia. The doctor's voice was gentle but clinical. It is a rare condition where the bone marrow stops producing enough blood cells, red cells, white cells, platelets, all of them. Reverie knew what aplastic anemia was. She had studied it in nursing school, had even cared for a patient with the condition during her residency. But knowing something medically and hearing it applied to your child were two entirely different experiences. "What does this mean?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "It means Cypress needs a bone marrow transplant. Without it, her body will continue to decline. Infections will become harder to fight. Bleeding will become harder to stop. Eventually," Dr. Castellan paused, his eyes heavy with sympathy, "eventually, her body will not be able to sustain itself." The room blurred. Reverie felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she made no move to wipe them away. "How do we find a donor?" "The National Registry is our first option. We will also test you to see if you are a match. Family members often have the best compatibility, but Reverie was not a match. The test results came back within days, confirming what some part of her had already feared. Her genetic markers were too different from Cypress's paternal line. The search expanded to the National Registry, then to international databases. Weeks passed, Cypress grew weaker, and the answer remained the same. No match found. The community of Crescent Harbor rallied around them. Blood drives were organized. Awareness campaigns spread across social media. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the little girl who loved shells and needed a miracle. Strangers from across the country reached out, offering prayers and well wishes and hope. But hope could not cure aplastic anemia. Only a compatible donor could do that. And the only compatible donor was the last person on Earth Reverie wanted to see. To understand why Reverie's heart turned to stone at the mention of Stellan Vance's name, you have to understand how deeply she once loved him. Because the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And Reverie had never been indifferent to Stellan. She had loved him with a fire that consumed everything else, and when that fire burned out, it left nothing but ash and anger in its wake. 9 years ago, Reverie Sinclair was a traveling nurse who moved from city to city, hospital to hospital, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. It was a lifestyle that suited her. She had grown up in foster care, bounced between homes that never quite fit, and she had learned early that the only person she could truly rely on was herself. Attachments were dangerous. Permanence was an illusion. Better to keep moving than to risk the pain of being left behind. That philosophy had served her well for 25 years, and then she took an assignment in Bar Harbor, Maine, and met a man who made her question everything she thought she knew about herself. Stellan Vance was not supposed to happen. Reverie first saw him at a fundraiser for the Maine Marine Sanctuary, an organization dedicated to protecting the coastal ecosystem and rehabilitating injured sea life. She had only gone because a colleague had an extra ticket, and Reverie had nothing better to do on a Friday night. She expected to spend a few hours sipping cheap wine, making small talk, and slipping out early. Instead, she spent the entire evening captivated by the man on stage. Stellan was the sanctuary's founder and director, tall and lean, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He spoke about ocean conservation with a passion that was almost contagious. He told stories about the whales he had helped save, the ecosystems he had worked to restore, the fight against the corporate interests that threatened the coastline. But what struck Reverie most was not his words. It was the way he spoke about defying expectations. "My family wanted me to go into real estate," Stellan said, his voice carrying across the crowded room. "They had my whole life planned out. Corner office, board meetings, a penthouse in Manhattan. But I looked at the ocean, at the life that depended on it, and I knew I could not turn my back on that. Some things are worth more than money. Some things are worth fighting for." After the speech, Reverie found herself drawn toward him like a moth to flame. She was not the type to approach strangers, especially attractive ones, but something about Stellan Vance made her forget her usual reservations. "That was quite a speech," she said, appearing at his side as he stood near the refreshment table. Stellan turned, and when his gray-green eyes met hers, Reverie felt something shift in her chest, a door opening, a wall crumbling. "Thank you." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face from serious to warm. "I am Stellan. Reverie." She shook his extended hand and felt a spark travel up her arm. "A few months," Stellan repeated. "Then I suppose I should make the most of them. Can I buy you a drink? The wine here is terrible, but there is a place down the street that makes a mean old-fashioned." Reverie should have said no. She had rules about this sort of thing. No attachments, no complications, no falling for men with storm-colored eyes and idealistic dreams. But she said yes. That night, they talked until the bar closed. Then they walked along the harbor, watching the moonlight dance on the water, and talked some more. Stellan told her about his childhood in a wealthy family that valued appearances over authenticity. About his mother who drank too much and his father who worked too much and his younger sister Bellamy who was the only person in his family who understood him. Reverie told him about foster care, about never belonging anywhere, about learning to be invisible because invisible children did not get hurt. By the time the sun rose, Reverie knew she was in trouble. "This is dangerous," she told herself as Stellan walked her back to her apartment. "He is going to matter, and people who matter always leave." But for the first time in her life, she decided that some risks were worth taking. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Stellan showed her his world, the lighthouse he was converting into a home, the sanctuary where he spent his days, the hidden coves and secret beaches that only locals knew about. Reverie showed him hers, the hospitals and clinics where she healed, the diner where she spent her off hours, the parts of herself she had never shared with anyone. Within 3 months, she had moved into the lighthouse. Within 6, they were married. The wedding was nothing like either of them had imagined. No grand venue or designer dress or 300 guests making polite small talk. Just the two of them on a beach at sunset, barefoot in the sand, exchanging vows they had written themselves. "I spent my whole life running," Reverie said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Running from pain, from attachment, from anything that might make me vulnerable. But with you, I want to stop. I want to stay. I want to build something that lasts." Stellan took her hands, his eyes glistening. "I have spent my whole life fighting my family, fighting expectations, fighting for things that mattered. But with you, I finally understand what I have been fighting for. A home, a partner, someone to share this crazy, beautiful life with. That someone is you, Reverie. It has always been you." They spoke their vows as rain began to fall, warm summer rain that soaked through their clothes and plastered their hair to their faces. They laughed and kissed and danced in the downpour. Two people who had finally found where they belonged. If only that feeling could have lasted forever. For a few perfect months, life in the lighthouse was everything Reverie had ever wanted. She and Stellan fell into an easy rhythm. Mornings spent walking the shore, days dedicated to their work, evenings curled up together watching storms roll in across the ocean. They talked about the future. Children, maybe 2 or 3. A life built on love and purpose instead of money and status. Then Reverie discovered she was pregnant, and everything began to change. At first, Stellan seemed happy. He held her when she told him, his face breaking into a smile that made her heart soar. "We are going to be parents," he said the words like they were sacred. "We are going to have a family." But in the days that followed, something shifted. The smile became strained. The joy gave way to distraction. Stellan started receiving phone calls at odd hours, stepping outside to take them in hushed tones. He disappeared for hours without explanation, returning with excuses that did not quite add up. "Is everything okay?" Reverie asked one evening, watching him pace by the window. "You have been so distant lately." Stellan stopped pacing but did not turn to face her. "I am fine. Just work stuff. The sanctuary is going through some funding issues. You would tell me if something was wrong, right?" He finally turned, and for a moment she saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or guilt, but before she could identify it, his expression smoothed into reassurance. "Of course," he said. "Everything is fine, I promise." But everything was not fine. Reverie could feel it in the growing silence between them, in the way he flinched when his phone rang, in the late nights when he thought she was asleep and she heard him whispering into his phone in the next room. She told herself she was being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones, abandonment issues, the ghosts of a childhood spent waiting for the other shoe to drop. But deep down, she knew. Something was very, very wrong. This story is just getting started, and the twists ahead are going to shake you. If you are feeling this journey, drop a comment below telling me what you would do in Reverie's situation. Would you have confronted Stellan sooner? Would you have demanded answers? Let me know, and let us keep going. The night that changed everything began like any other. Reverie was 7 months pregnant, her belly swollen and heavy, her back aching from the strain. Stellan had been gone since that morning, something about an emergency at the sanctuary that required his immediate attention. She had not questioned it. She was too tired to question anything anymore. By 8 o'clock that evening, she was in bed, drifting in and out of an uneasy sleep. The lighthouse groaned in the wind, familiar sounds that usually comforted her. But tonight, something felt off, a tension in the air, a premonition she could not shake. At 9:15, she felt the first cramp. At 9:20, her water broke. At 9:25, she was on the floor of the bedroom, clutching her phone with trembling hands, trying to reach her husband. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. "Stellan, it is me." She tried to keep her voice calm, but panic was clawing at her throat. "Something is wrong. I am bleeding. Please call me back." She hung up and called again. Voicemail. And again. Voicemail. By the time she managed to drag herself to the car, her nightgown was soaked with blood. The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and terror, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, her vision swimming at the edges. She almost did not make it. At the hospital, everything happened fast. Too fast. Nurses shouting orders, monitors beeping warnings, someone saying the words placental abruption and emergency cesarean, and we are losing her. Reverie remembered the bright lights of the operating room. She remembered the cold of the surgical table against her back. She remembered asking about her baby, about Stellan, about why no one was answering her questions. And then she remembered nothing at all. When she woke up, she was in a recovery room. Machines beeped beside her. An IV dripped into her arm. And a nurse with kind eyes was explaining that her daughter had been born premature but stable, that she was in the NICU. That Reverie had lost a lot of blood but was going to be okay. "My husband," Reverie croaked. "Where is my husband?" The nurse's expression flickered. "We have been trying to reach him. He has not answered." For 2 days, Stellan did not appear. Reverie lay in that hospital bed, too weak to walk, unable to hold her newborn daughter, calling a phone that never picked up. She left messages that grew increasingly desperate, pleading, begging. "Where are you? Why are you not here?" "I almost died, Stellan. Our daughter is in the NICU. Please, please come. When he finally walked through the door, 48 hours after Cypress was born, Reverie felt something inside her die. He looked terrible, exhausted, rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. He stood in the doorway like a man facing execution, his shoulders hunched, his hands shaking. Reverie. His voice cracked. I am so sorry. I just heard. I came as fast as I could. Just heard? The words came out flat. Dead. I called you 47 times. I left messages. I almost bled to death on the floor of our home while you were nowhere to be found. Stellan crossed the room, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. Where were you? He hesitated. That hesitation told her everything she needed to know. Stellan. Her voice was ice. Where were you? I was with Margot. The name hit her like a slap. Margot. His college girlfriend. The woman he had dated for 3 years before Reverie. The woman whose picture still sat in a box in their closet because Stellan had never gotten around to throwing it away. You were with your ex-girlfriend, Reverie said slowly, while I was giving birth to your daughter alone. It is not what you think. Stellan's voice was desperate. She was in crisis. She needed help. I had to be there. You had to be there. Reverie laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your ex-girlfriend was in crisis, so you had to be there. Meanwhile, your wife was hemorrhaging. Your wife was dying. Your daughter was fighting for her life in the NICU, but Margot needed you. Reverie, please. Let me explain. No. Reverie shook her head slowly. I do not want your explanations. I do not want your excuses. I want you to leave. Stellan stared at her, his face crumbling. You do not mean that. I have never meant anything more in my life. Get out. Now. He tried to argue. He tried to apologize. He tried to make her understand something she no longer had the capacity to hear. But Reverie was done. 3 weeks later, she signed the divorce papers. She refused alimony. She refused child support. She refused any connection to the man who had abandoned her during the worst moment of her life. And then she packed up her newborn daughter and disappeared. For 8 years, Reverie Whitlock carried the weight of that night like a stone in her chest. She built a life in Crescent Harbor, a good life, filled with work she loved and a community that embraced her and a daughter who was the center of her universe. But the walls she built around her heart were impenetrable. She did not date. She did not trust. She did not allow anyone close enough to hurt her again. Stellan sent letters. For the first year, they arrived every week. She returned them unopened. He sent money. She sent it back. He tried calling from different numbers, and she blocked every single one. Eventually, he stopped trying. Or at least, she assumed he did. She had made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with him, and he had apparently gotten the message. What she did not know, what she refused to know, was that those letters contained truths she needed to hear. Explanations that might have changed everything. But Reverie had made her choice. She had chosen to believe the worst about Stellan Vance, and she had built her entire post-divorce identity around that belief. Now, 8 years later, she was about to discover that the story she told herself might not have been the whole truth. The call to Stellan was the hardest thing Reverie had ever done. She sat in her car outside the hospital, phone in hand, staring at the number Dr. Castellan's assistant had provided. Her finger hovered over the call button for what felt like hours. Every instinct screamed at her to find another way. There had to be another donor, another option, some solution that did not require her to face the man who had shattered her. But Cypress was dying, and Reverie would do anything, sacrifice anything to save her daughter, even her pride, even her pain. She pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. For a wild moment, she hoped it would go to voicemail. She could leave a message. Keep her distance. Hello? His voice had not changed. That was the first thing she noticed. Deeper, maybe rougher around the edges, but still unmistakably Stellan. She could not speak. Her throat had closed up, 8 years of anger and grief forming a wall that words could not penetrate. Hello? Is someone there? It is Reverie. She finally managed to force the words out. They sounded foreign in her own ears. Reverie Whitlock. Your ex-wife. Silence. A long, loaded silence that crackled through the phone line like electricity. Reverie. When he finally spoke, her name sounded like a prayer. After all this time, I never thought I would hear. I am not calling to talk about us. Her voice was sharp, clinical, the voice she used with difficult patients and demanding doctors. I am calling because I need something from you. Anything. The word came immediately, without hesitation. Whatever you need, name it. Reverie closed her eyes, steeling herself for what came next. Our daughter is dying. She has a rare blood disease. She needs a bone marrow transplant, and you are the only match. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. She could practically hear his world restructuring itself around this new information. Our daughter, he repeated slowly. Reverie. I never knew her name. You never let me. Please, tell me about her. Something in his voice cracked the armor around her heart. Just a hairline fracture, but enough to let a sliver of light through. Her name is Cypress. She is 8 years old. She has your eyes and your stubbornness, and she asks about you more often than she should. She loves the ocean and collecting shells, and she is the only reason I have gotten out of bed for the past 8 years. She stopped, her voice breaking. And she is dying, and I need you to come here and save her life. Can you do that? I will be on the next flight. Stellan's voice was thick with emotion. Just tell me where. Reverie gave him the details. Crescent Harbor, the medical center, the time she would meet him. And Stellan, she added before hanging up, this does not change anything between us. You are not coming here to be her father. You are coming here to be her donor. That is all. She hung up before he could respond. Stellan Vance arrived in Crescent Harbor on a gray Tuesday morning, stepping off a chartered plane at the small regional airport with nothing but a carry-on bag and a heart full of hope and terror. The town was nothing like he had imagined. Quiet streets lined with weathered storefronts, fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and secrets were hard to keep. Reverie had built a life here, a life without him, a life he knew nothing about. He had spent the entire flight thinking about the daughter he had never met. Cypress. The name was perfect, strong and unique and connected to nature, just like her mother. For 8 years, he had tried to reach them, letters returned unopened, money sent back, phone calls blocked. He had respected Reverie's wishes, believing that space was what she needed, that eventually the anger would fade and she would let him explain. But the anger had not faded, and now he was here, not as a returning father, but as a medical donor, a means to an end, nothing more. At least, that was what Reverie wanted, but Stellan knew something she did not. He knew the truth about the night she had almost died. He knew the secrets he had kept and the reasons he had kept them. He knew that the story she believed, the story that had driven her away, was built on a misunderstanding he had been too broken to correct. Now, after 8 years of silence, he finally had the chance to tell her everything. Whether she would listen was another matter entirely. He found her waiting for him at a coffee shop on the pier, sitting alone at a table by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug she was not drinking from. She looked different than he remembered. Older, obviously, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion, but still beautiful. Still the woman who had changed his life. She did not smile when he approached. She did not stand. She simply looked at him with those dark eyes that had once held so much love, now filled with something cold and guarded. You came. Her voice was flat. I told you I would. He sat down across from her, resisting the urge to reach for her hand. Reverie. Thank you for calling me. I know how hard that must have been. I did not call you for thanks. She cut him off. I called you because my daughter needs bone marrow, and you are the only match in the entire national registry. That is the beginning and end of this conversation. Stellan nodded slowly, accepting the boundary she was drawing. I understand. Just tell me what I need to do. Reverie pulled out a folder of paperwork, pre-operative testing, compatibility confirmation, consent forms. The procedure itself was straightforward, at least medically. A few hours under anesthesia, a recovery period, and then Stellan would be on his way back to California. That was the plan anyway. I have one condition, Stellan said after reviewing the documents. Before the surgery, I want to meet her. Cyprus. I want to see my daughter. No. The refusal was immediate, absolute. Stellan set down the folder. Reverie. She is my daughter too. I have missed 8 years of her life. 8 years of birthdays and first days of school and everything that matters. I am not asking for custody or visitation or anything like that. I am just asking for the chance to look at her, to know she is real. She is real. She is lying in a hospital bed wondering why her body is failing her, and the last thing she needs is a stranger walking in and complicating everything. Stellan flinched at the word stranger. Is that what I am? A stranger? That is exactly what you are. Reverie's voice was hard. You gave up the right to be anything else the night you chose someone else over us. Something flickered in Stellan's expression. Pain, maybe, or frustration. But he did not argue. He simply picked up the consent forms, signed them, and slid them back across the table. I will do the surgery, he said quietly. I will do whatever Cyprus needs. But Reverie, at some point, we need to talk. Really talk. There are things you do not know. Things I should have told you 8 years ago. There is nothing you could tell me that would change what happened. Stellan met her gaze. You might be surprised. Before Reverie could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. I have to go. She stood abruptly. There is a complication with Cyprus. Get the testing done today. The surgery is scheduled for Thursday. She was gone before he could say another word, leaving Stellan alone at the table with a folder full of paperwork and a heart full of unanswered questions. The complication was a fever. 103 degrees and climbing. Cyprus's already weakened immune system was struggling to fight an infection that would have been minor in a healthy child but could be devastating in her condition. Reverie burst through the doors of the pediatric ward to find her daughter surrounded by medical staff, her small body shivering beneath thin hospital blankets, her gray-green eyes glassy with fever. Mama. Cyprus's voice was barely a whisper. I do not feel good. I know, baby. Reverie pushed past the nurses to take her daughter's hand. I am here. Mama is right here. Dr. Castellan appeared at her side, his expression grave. We are starting IV antibiotics. Her white blood cell count is dangerously low. The infection is spreading faster than we anticipated. What does this mean for the transplant? It means we need to move faster. The doctor lowered his voice. If we do not get this infection under control, she may not be strong enough to survive the procedure. But if we wait too long, she may not survive at all. The words hit Reverie like a physical blow. She looked at her daughter, so small and fragile against the hospital bed, fighting a battle she should never have had to fight. Do whatever you need to do. Reverie's voice was steel wrapped around breaking glass. Save my daughter. The next 48 hours were a blur of medications and monitoring, of sleepless nights and desperate prayers. Reverie did not leave Cyprus's side. She held her daughter's hand through the fever spikes and the chills, through the moments of clarity and the stretches of delirious sleep. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she thought about Stellan. He had completed his testing. The results confirmed what they already knew. A perfect match. His bone marrow could save Cyprus's life, if only her body could hold on long enough to receive it. On the second night, when Cyprus was finally stable enough to sleep peacefully, Reverie stepped out into the hallway to breathe. The corridor was quiet, lit by the soft glow of emergency lights. She leaned against the wall, exhaustion weighing on her like a physical force. That was when she saw him. Stellan was sitting in the waiting area at the end of the hall, slumped in a plastic chair, his head bowed over clasped hands. He looked like he had not slept in days. He looked like he had been there the entire time. She should have walked away. She should have ignored him and returned to her daughter's room. But something pulled her forward, some combination of exhaustion and curiosity and emotions she did not want to name. What are you doing here? Her voice came out harsher than she intended. Stellan looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, haunted. Waiting. Hoping. Praying. Even though I am not sure anyone is listening. The surgery is not until Thursday. You did not need to stay. I know. He stood slowly, his movements stiff from hours in the uncomfortable chair. But I could not leave, not knowing she was in there fighting, not knowing if she would make it. Reverie studied him, searching for the manipulation, the angle. She had spent 8 years convincing herself that Stellan Vance was a selfish coward who had abandoned his family for another woman. But the man standing before her did not look selfish. He looked broken. "She is stable now," Reverie finally said. "The fever is coming down. Dr. Castellan thinks she will be strong enough for the surgery." Stellan closed his eyes, releasing a breath that seemed to carry years of tension. Thank God. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. "Reverie." Stellan's voice was quiet. "I know you do not want to hear anything I have to say, but please, before the surgery, let me see her. Just for a moment, let me look at my daughter." Reverie should have said no. Every protective instinct in her body screamed against it. But she thought about Cyprus, lying in that hospital bed, asking about the father she had never known. She thought about the questions that would come after the surgery, the explanations she would have to give. And she thought about what Odalis had said when Reverie had confided in her about Stellan's arrival. That little girl has spent 8 years wondering why her father did not want her. Maybe this is a chance to give her a different story. Not for him, for her. 5 minutes. Reverie's voice was barely audible. "You can see her for 5 minutes, but you do not tell her who you are. Not yet. She is too weak for that kind of shock." Stellan nodded, gratitude flooding his features. "Thank you." They walked together to Cyprus's room, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Reverie paused at the door, her hand on the handle. She is 8 years old. She loves the ocean. She collects shells and paints them with sea creatures. She asks too many questions and reads books that are too advanced for her age. She is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Stellan's jaw tightened. I should have been there. For all of it. Yes, Reverie pushed open the door. You should have. Cyprus was awake when they entered, propped up against pillows, her tablet abandoned on the blanket beside her. She looked better than she had in days, the color returning to her cheeks, the clarity returning to her eyes. Mama. Cyprus's gaze shifted to Stellan, curiosity flickering across her features. Who is that? Reverie glanced at Stellan, whose face had gone pale with emotion. This is Stellan. He is the person who is going to help you get better. Cyprus studied him with that intense, knowing gaze that had always reminded Reverie of an old soul trapped in a young body. Are you a doctor? No. Stellan's voice was thick. I am just someone who wants to see you healthy again. He moved closer, slowly, as if approaching a wild creature he did not want to frighten. When he reached the side of the bed, he simply stood there, drinking in the sight of his daughter with eyes that glistened with unshed tears. You have pretty eyes, Cyprus said matter-of-factly. They look like mine. Stellan laughed, a broken sound that was half sob. They do they not? Mama says I got them from my father. Cyprus tilted her head. She says he loved the ocean too. Do you love the ocean? More than almost anything. Stellan's voice wavered. I work with marine animals, whales and dolphins and seals. I help protect them. Cyprus's eyes widened. Real whales? Have you ever touched one? Many times. Would you like me to tell you about them? Cyprus nodded eagerly, and Stellan pulled a chair close to her bed. For the next 15 minutes, far longer than the 5 Reverie had promised, he told her stories about the sanctuary in California, about the baby whale he had helped rescue just last month, about the pod of dolphins that came to the shore every morning like clockwork. Cyprus listened with rapt attention, her questions flowing faster than Stellan could answer them. And Reverie stood in the doorway, watching her daughter light up in a way she had not seen in weeks. She hated Stellan for having that effect. She hated how natural they seemed together. She hated the way Cyprus leaned toward him like a flower toward the sun. And beneath the hatred, buried so deep she almost did not recognize it, was something else entirely. When Stellan finally stood to leave, Cyprus grabbed his hand. Will you come back tomorrow? Her voice was small, hopeful. I want to hear more stories. Stellan looked at Reverie, silently asking permission. She gave a barely perceptible nod. I will come back every day until you are well enough to leave this place. Stellan squeezed Cyprus's hand gently. I promise. As they stepped into the hallway, Reverie felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not understanding, but something. She has your laugh. Stellan said quietly. I heard it just now, when I told her about the seal that kept stealing fish from our researchers. That was your laugh. Reverie did not know how to respond, so she said nothing. The surgery is Thursday morning. She finally spoke. 7 a.m. Be here by 6 for prep. I will be here. He turned to go, and despite herself, Reverie called out. Stellan. He stopped, looking back at her. Those letters you sent, the ones I returned, what did they say? Stellan held her gaze for a long moment. The truth. About that night. About why I was not there. About the things I should have told you before you left. Why did you not just tell me then? In the hospital. Why let me believe the worst? Because you had already decided what the truth was. Stellan's voice was heavy with regret, and I was too broken to fight for a different version. I had just spent 48 hours in a psychiatric facility watching my sister try to die. I did not have anything left. The words hit Reverie like a thunderclap. Your sister? Bellamy. Stellan's jaw tightened. Not Margot. Never Margot. The woman I was with that night was my baby sister. She had tried to kill herself after escaping her abusive husband, and I was the only one she called. Reverie stared at him, the ground shifting beneath her feet. That is not what you told me. You said Margot, your ex-girlfriend. You said she was in crisis. I said someone was in crisis. You assumed Margot. Stellan's voice cracked. And I was too exhausted, too traumatized, too ashamed of my family's dysfunction to correct you. You looked at me with such hatred, Reverie, such absolute conviction that I had betrayed you. And I thought maybe you were right. Maybe I had betrayed you, just not in the way you believed. I was not there when you needed me. The reason did not change the result. Reverie's legs gave out. She sank onto a bench in the hallway, her mind reeling. 8 years, she whispered. I have hated you for 8 years because I thought you chose another woman over me. Over our daughter. I know. Why did you not fight harder? Why did you not make me listen? Stellan sat down beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. Because I thought I was protecting Bellamy. She made me promise never to tell anyone, especially not our parents. She was terrified of what they would do if they found out. And after you left, after you made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me, I told myself it was better this way. You could move on. You could build a life without the baggage of my broken family. So you just let me go. I wrote you letters, every week for a year. I explained everything. I begged you to read them. Reverie remembered the letters. The stack of envelopes with Stellan's handwriting that she had returned unopened, every single one. The proof of his deception, she had thought. His attempts to manipulate his way back into her life. Now she wondered what she had thrown away. I need to think. Her voice was barely audible. This is too much. I cannot process this right now. I understand. Stellan stood slowly. I will be here Thursday morning. Whatever you decide after that, whatever you need from me, I will respect it. But Reverie, please know this. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped thinking about you and the daughter I was never allowed to know. And if I could go back and change everything, I would in a heartbeat. He walked away, leaving Reverie alone in the hallway with the weight of 8 years of misunderstanding crashing down around her. That night, Reverie could not sleep. She sat in the chair beside Cypress's bed, watching her daughter breathe, her mind replaying every moment of the past 8 years through a different lens. She had been so certain, so absolutely convinced that she knew the truth about Stellan Vance. He was a coward, a cheater, a man who had abandoned his family for an old girlfriend. But what if she had been wrong? The thought was almost too much to bear. Because if Stellan was telling the truth, if the woman he had been with was his sister and not his ex, then Reverie had spent 8 years punishing an innocent man. She had kept a father from his daughter. She had built walls around her heart based on a lie she told herself. And those letters, those dozens of letters she had returned without reading, they might have contained the truth that could have changed everything. Around 3 a.m, Reverie made a decision. She slipped out of Cypress's room and drove to her cottage by the shore. In the back of her closet, buried beneath boxes of old photographs and baby clothes, was a wooden chest she had not opened in years. Inside were the letters. She had not thrown them away. Some part of her, some tiny fragment of the woman who had once loved Stellan Vance, had kept them, just in case. Now, with trembling hands, she opened the first envelope. Dear Reverie, I do not know if you will ever read this, but I have to try. I have to explain what happened that night, even if you never forgive me. The woman I was with was not Margot. It was Bellamy, my sister. She called me from a hotel room in Portland, barely coherent, saying she had taken a bottle of pills. I drove 3 hours in the middle of the night to find her unconscious in a bathtub. I saved her life, Reverie. But in doing so, I missed the most important night of yours. The letter went on, detailing the 48 hours Stellan had spent at the psychiatric facility, holding Bellamy's hand, keeping her secret from their parents, who would have seen her break down as an embarrassment to the family name. He wrote about receiving Reverie's voicemails while sitting in a hospital waiting room, each message more desperate than the last, and feeling his heart shatter into pieces. I wanted to come to you. Every minute of those 2 days, I wanted to leave Bellamy and rush to your side. But she begged me not to tell anyone. She said if I left, she would try again. She said I was the only person who understood. So I stayed. And I lost you. I will never forgive myself for not being there when you needed me. I will never forgive myself for the choice I made. But please, Reverie, understand that I was not choosing another woman over you. I was choosing to save my sister's life, and I have paid for that choice every single day since. Reverie read letter after letter, tears streaming down her face. Each one revealed more of the truth she had refused to see. Stellan's guilt, his grief, his endless, hopeless love for a woman who had shut him out completely. In one letter, dated a year after she left, he wrote about finally telling his parents about Bellamy's suicide attempt. Their reaction was exactly what he had feared: cold, dismissive, more concerned about scandal than their daughter's well-being. You were right to leave this family, Reverie. We are broken in ways that cannot be fixed. But please know that the brokenness was never about you. It was about us. About me. About the cowardice that runs in our blood. In another letter, from 3 years later, he wrote about the therapy he had started. About learning to understand his own patterns of self-sabotage. About coming to terms with the fact that he had let the love of his life slip away because he did not know how to ask for help. I am trying to become the man you deserved. It is probably too late. You have probably moved on, found someone who can be there for you in the ways I could not. But I want you to know that I am trying. For you. For the daughter I have never met. For myself. By the time Reverie finished the last letter, the sun was beginning to rise over Crescent Harbor. She sat on the floor of her closet, surrounded by paper, her heart broken in an entirely new way. She had been so wrong. So terribly, unforgivably wrong. But Stellan had been wrong too. He had let her believe a lie because he was too broken to fight. He had prioritized his sister's secret over his own marriage. He had failed to show up for her in the moment she needed him most. The truth was not black and white. It was not villain and victim. It was two flawed people making terrible decisions in impossible circumstances. It was love destroyed not by betrayal, but by silence. And now, after 8 years, they had a chance to start again. Not for themselves. Not for the love they once shared. For Cyprus. What do you think those letters contained? Were you surprised by the truth? Comment your theories and reactions below, and if this story is touching your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear a message about second chances. Now, let us see what happens next. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, fog rolling in from the ocean to blanket Crescent Harbor in a shroud of white. Reverie sat in the surgical waiting room, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. In the operating room down the hall, 2 surgeries were happening simultaneously. Stellan was having bone marrow extracted from his hip. Cyprus was being prepared to receive it. Odalis sat beside Reverie, a steady presence in the chaos. She had been there since dawn, bringing coffee and comfort and the kind of quiet strength that only true friends can offer. She is going to be okay. Odalis placed a hand on Reverie's arm. Reverie shook her head. She gets it from both of us, I think. Odalis raised an eyebrow. Does that mean you have decided to let him in? It means I have decided to stop letting the past dictate the future. Reverie's voice was quiet but steady. I read the letters. All of them. I know the truth now. And I do not know what to do with it. Reverie looked at her friend with eyes that held 8 years of pain and one night of revelation. He is not the monster I made him into. But he is not innocent either. He still was not there when I needed him. He still let me believe the worst about him instead of fighting for us. So what happens now? Now we save our daughter. After that, Reverie paused, searching for words. After that, we figure out how to be her parents, together or separately, whatever is best for her. The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours of waiting and praying and watching the clock tick forward with agonizing slowness. Reverie paced the waiting room. She stared out windows. She drank coffee she did not taste and answered texts from concerned neighbors without registering the words she typed. When Dr. Castellan finally appeared in the doorway, still wearing his surgical scrubs, Reverie's heart stopped. She studied his face, searching for clues. His expression was unreadable, neutral in the way that medical professionals learn to be when delivering news that could go either way. "How is she?" Reverie's voice came out as a whisper. The doctor's face broke into a smile. "She did beautifully. The transplant was successful. Her body is already beginning to accept the new marrow." Reverie's legs gave out. Odalis caught her, holding her steady as relief flooded through her system like a drug. "She is going to be okay? She is going to be okay." Dr. Castellan nodded. "There is still a recovery period ahead of us. Weeks in the hospital, careful monitoring, the possibility of complications. But the hardest part is over. Cypress is a fighter. She proved that today. Can I see her? She is in recovery. Give us an hour to get her settled, and then yes, you can see her." "What about Stellan?" Reverie asked the question before she could stop herself. "How is he?" The doctor's expression softened. "He came through the extraction well. He is resting now. He asked about Cypress the moment he woke up, made us promise to tell you she was okay before he would let himself fall back asleep." Reverie nodded, something shifting in her chest. "Can you tell him thank you? Tell him his daughter is going to live because of him." "I will." Dr. Castellan smiled. "I will tell him." An hour later, Reverie stood in the doorway of Cypress's recovery room. Her daughter was sleeping, hooked up to monitors and IV lines, but the color in her cheeks was already better, already brighter. She crossed the room and took Cypress's hand, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You did it, little starfish." She whispered the words against her daughter's skin. "You fought so hard, and you won." Cypress stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Mama? I am here, baby. I am right here." "Did it work?" Cypress's voice was groggy but hopeful. "Am I going to get better?" "Yes, sweetheart." Reverie's eyes filled with tears. "You are going to get better. The bone marrow is already doing its job. You are going to be just fine." A small smile crossed Cypress's face. "Good, because I need to collect more shells. My collection is getting dusty." Reverie laughed through her tears. "Your collection will be waiting for you. I promise." "Mama?" Cypress's eyes were drifting closed again, sleep pulling her back under. "That man. Stellan. He is my father, is he not?" The question hung in the air, gentle but unmistakable. Reverie hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, baby, he is." "I knew it." Cypress's voice was barely audible. "He has my eyes, and he tells good stories. I think I want to get to know him. Is that okay?" Reverie brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, her heart aching with a complex mixture of emotions. "That is more than okay." She whispered the words as Cypress drifted back to sleep. "That is exactly what should happen." The recovery period was slow and careful, but each day brought new progress. Cypress's blood counts improved. Her energy returned. The spark that had been missing from her eyes came back, brighter than before. And Stellan was there for all of it. He came every day, always asking permission, never overstepping. He read to Cypress from books about the ocean. He showed her videos from the sanctuary of baby seals learning to swim. He helped her with the jigsaw puzzles that the nurses brought and laughed at her terrible knock-knock jokes. Slowly, Carefully, Cypress and her father began to build a relationship. Reverie watched from a distance, still guarded, still uncertain, but she could not deny what she saw. Stellan was patient and gentle. He did not push for too much too fast. He let Cypress set the pace, following her lead with a humility that surprised Reverie. One evening, about 2 weeks into the recovery, Reverie found Stellan sitting alone in the hospital courtyard. The sun was setting over Crescent Harbor, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She hesitated, then sat down beside him. Dr. Castellan says she can come home in a few days. Reverie kept her voice neutral. Her immune system is strong enough now. That is wonderful news. Stellan's voice was warm but cautious. She has come so far. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sunset. What happens now? Reverie finally asked. After she comes home. What is your plan? Stellan turned to look at her. I have been thinking about that. A lot, actually. I called my team in California and told them I am taking an extended leave. I found a cottage to rent here in town. Nothing fancy. Just something small where I can stay while Cypress recovers. You are staying in Crescent Harbor? If that is all right with you. Stellan's eyes held a question. I do not want to intrude on the life you have built here. But I also do not want to be a part-time father who flies in for holidays and disappears again. I want to be present. Really present. For however long you will let me. Reverie considered his words. Part of her wanted to refuse. To protect the boundaries she had built. But another part, the part that had read those letters and seen the truth behind his silence, recognized what he was offering. Not a takeover, not an invasion, just presence, consistency, the thing he should have offered 8 years ago. There is a cottage on Maple Street. Reverie heard herself speaking before she had consciously decided to. Mrs. Holloway is looking for a tenant. It is about 3 blocks from our house. Stellan's face lit up with careful hope. I will look into it. Thank you, Reverie. Do not thank me yet. She stood up, brushing off her jeans. You have a lot of years to make up for. This is just the beginning. I know. Stellan stood as well, facing her. And Reverie? I meant what I said that night in the hallway. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped regretting the choice I made. But I also understand that love is not enough. Trust takes time. Forgiveness takes longer. I am not asking for either right now. What are you asking for? A chance. Stellan's voice was quiet but steady. To be the father I should have been from the start. To prove that I can show up. Every day, no matter what. And maybe someday, if you can find it in your heart, to talk about whether there is anything left of what we once had. Reverie met his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the vulnerability he was no longer trying to hide. One day at a time, she said finally. That is all I can promise. That is all I am asking for. The day Cypress came home was the brightest Reverie could remember. The whole town seemed to celebrate. Neighbors brought casseroles and flowers. Odalis organized a welcome home party at the cottage. The children from Cypress's school made a banner that stretched across the front porch. Welcome home, Cypress. We missed you. Stellan helped carry Cypress from the car, setting her gently on the couch while Reverie arranged pillows around her. This is weird, Cypress announced, looking around at the crowded living room. Everyone is staring at me. That is because everyone loves you, little starfish. Reverie smoothed her daughter's hair. You scared us all pretty badly. I did not mean to. Cypress's voice was small. I just got sick. And now you are getting better. Stellan crouched beside the couch, his hand resting gently on Cypress's arm. That is all that matters. Cypress looked at him, then at her mother, a question forming in her eyes. Are you two going to be nice to each other now? The room fell quiet. Reverie felt Stellan's gaze on her, waiting for her to take the lead. We are going to try. Reverie chose her words carefully. Your father and I have a lot of history. Some of it is complicated, but we both love you, and that is more important than anything that happened between us. So he is going to stay? Cypress pressed. He is not going to leave again? Stellan spoke before Reverie could. I am not going anywhere, Cypress. I promise you that. I made a lot of mistakes before you were born. Mistakes that hurt your mother and kept me from being part of your life. But I am here now, and I'm going to be here for every shell hunting expedition and every birthday and every time you need me. That is a promise. Cypress studied him with those wise old eyes. Okay, she nodded solemnly. But if you break your promise, I am going to be really mad. Fair enough. Stellan smiled. I would expect nothing less. The weeks that followed were a slow dance of healing and rebuilding. Stellan moved into the cottage on Maple Street and quickly became a fixture of life in Crescent Harbor. He helped at the local Marine Education Center. He joined the morning coffee crowd at the pier. He learned the names of every shopkeeper and fisherman and became known as Cypress's father in a way that felt surprisingly natural. For Cypress, having both parents in her life was a dream come true. She blossomed under the attention, her recovery accelerating as her heart healed alongside her body. She and Stellan developed their own rituals. Evening walks along the shore. Weekly video calls with the sanctuary in California, where Stellan introduced her to the animals he worked with. Cooking experiments in his tiny kitchen that resulted in more laughter than edible food. Reverie watched it all unfold, her walls slowly crumbling despite her best efforts to maintain them. One evening, about 3 months after the surgery, she and Stellan sat on the beach while Cypress hunted for shells in the shallows. The sun was setting, painting the water gold, and for a moment everything felt peaceful, complete. She is happy. Reverie spoke quietly, not wanting Cypress to overhear. Happier than I have seen her in years. She is an incredible kid. Stellan's voice was full of wonder. Every day I learn something new about her, and every day I feel more grateful that I get to be part of her life. Reverie nodded, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? Anything. Your sister. Bellamy. How is she now? Stellan was quiet for a moment. She is doing well, actually. After everything that happened, she finally left my family's orbit. She moved to Oregon, started therapy, built a life of her own. She is engaged now to a woman who treats her like she deserves to be treated. I am glad to hear that. She wants to meet Cypress someday, if that is ever okay with you. She feels terrible about what her crisis cost us. She has apologized to me 100 times over the years. Reverie considered this. She kept her eyes on Cypress, watching her daughter bend to examine something in the sand. Maybe someday, she finally said. When Cypress is older. When we have had more time to build this new version of our family. Our family. Stellan repeated the words like they were precious. I never thought I would hear you say that. Do not get too excited. Reverie's voice held a hint of her old sharpness, but her eyes were soft. We are still figuring things out. I am still figuring things out. I know. And I will wait as long as you need. Whatever you decide, whatever form this takes, I am just grateful to be here. They sat in companionable silence, watching their daughter dance at the edge of the waves. Mama, Daddy, look what I found. Cypress came running toward them, something clutched in her small hands. She opened her fingers to reveal a perfect spiral shell, pale pink and unblemished. It is beautiful. Reverie smiled. Where are you going to put it? In the special section. Cypress announced. The section for the most important things. Reverie felt tears prick her eyes. Beside her, Stellan's breath caught. Come here, little starfish. Reverie opened her arms, and Cypress tumbled into her embrace. Stellan hesitated, uncertain of his place in this moment. But Cypress reached out and grabbed his hand, pulling him closer. You too, Daddy. This is a family hug. And so it was. The three of them sat on the beach as the sun sank below the horizon, holding each other, healing together. It was not perfect. There were still wounds that needed time to close, trust that needed to be rebuilt, conversations that needed to happen, but it was real. And it was theirs. And for the first time in 8 years, Reverie allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the future could be brighter than the past. Some wounds are too deep to heal overnight. Some betrayals are too profound to simply forgive and forget. But sometimes, life gives us moments that force us to choose. Choose between holding on to pain and reaching toward healing. Choose between protecting our hearts and opening them to possibility. Choose between the story we have told ourselves and the truth that has been waiting all along. Reverie learned that forgiveness is not about pretending the hurt never happened. It is about deciding that your future matters more than your past. It is about recognizing that people can fail us profoundly and still be worthy of love. It is about understanding that sometimes the person who destroyed your heart is also the only one who can help you rebuild what matters most. Stellan learned that protecting someone by leaving them is not protection at all. It is abandonment dressed in noble clothing. True love does not run from hard things. It stays. It fights. It shows up day after day, even when it is terrifying, even when it means facing the consequences of our worst decisions. And Cypress, that wise old soul in a young body, she learned that families do not have to be perfect to be whole. That love can survive separation. That sometimes the people who hurt us the most are also the people who need our grace the most. The shell collection on Cypress's bookshelf grew that year. But the most treasured piece was not a shell at all. It was a small, framed photograph that sat in the center of the display. 3 figures on a beach at sunset. A mother, a father, a daughter, a family, finally complete. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are not about the romance between 2 people. They are about the courage it takes to let someone back in after they have broken you. They are about choosing forgiveness over bitterness, presence over absence, hope over fear. They are about understanding that the person who destroyed your heart might also be the only one who can help you save what matters most. Beautiful family. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button. Your support helps these messages reach more people who need to hear them. Subscribe to Cedar Drama if you have not already, and turn on notifications so you never miss our stories of love, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to forgive someone who deeply hurt you? Have you ever been the one who needed forgiveness? Share your story in the comments below. This community is a safe space for healing, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember, it is never too late to show up for the people who matter. It is never too late to tell the truth. And it is never too late to let love back in, even when you are afraid. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, take care of your heart and take care of each other.